Welcome to Shaping Our Success, brought to you by the Law Society of Scotland and Hay Legal. Today, I'm pleased to welcome our two guests, Cherie Parnell and Shuna McCahon, who are going to tell us about their background and the work that they do with the charity Beam. Cherie founded Beam after years of working as a barrister in the family law courts, where she would represent mothers who very often would lose their children to the care system. Knowing that many of these mothers had often suffered abuse and trauma in their lives was difficult to reconcile with the knowledge that there was no support group available. Cherie decided to leave the bar and start a local group called Beam to support these mothers, and we're going to learn more about her background and journey today. Shuna is director at Beam and an accredited member of the British Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy. She works as a school counselor and also provides counseling for adults, both privately and for a local counseling charity. Shuna has been involved for many years in training people to become certified counselors. She's seen firsthand the changes that many of the mothers at Beam experience through finding their voice and being empowered through peer-to-peer support. So first of all, I'd like to thank you both so much for joining us today. So let's start by talking a bit about your background, Cherie. What was your career before founding Beam? We've already mentioned that you were a lawyer, but can you tell us a bit more about your practice and what initially drew you to law?
Yeah, so I was a single mom with two small children, and I was working as a night typist in a law firm. And there was an amazing woman called Brenda Head, and she really encouraged me. She was so inspirational. I owe a great debt to Brenda, and I always tell her that we're still friends today. That was really the beginning of then pursuing. I did a foundation in history and then moved on to do a full law degree at the University of East Anglia.
So moving on from your background and why you started to study law, was there a catalyst moment that you can point to that made you decide to take the leap and leave your law practice and found Beam?
There was an ongoing sort of unease within myself the longer that you practice within the family courts, and you come across, deep trauma and a great deal of anguish within people's lives. And began wrestling with this idea that I wanted to do something. I'd see these mothers leaving court and knowing that they would have a few more sessions of contact with their child and then they would say goodbye, or that they would see their child once every 6 weeks, for a couple of hours. And this began to really play on my mind that something needed to be done. I got to a point where, because I was going back and forth, but I didn't really want to leave my job. I enjoyed the money, I enjoyed the status. I remember saying to my husband, I'm going to stop wrestling with this. And if I come to a point where I know, then I'll do it. And that sounds easier said than done. But I've been reading about two men who left their security, left their employment, left everything to follow somebody. It was Christ who says, "Come, follow me." And so I said that to my husband, and about a few days later, I received a blog from a friend of ours who was writing, and in it, he wrote, "There'll come a time in your life when you'll have to make a decision. Do you follow the money or do you follow the holy man?" And he says, like Matthew, who was a disciple, he heard this call and he followed. And in that moment, it was like, I knew. I knew, and it doesn't probably make sense to a lot of people, but it just hit me. And I was like, I'm going to leave. So at that stage, I really, I really didn't actually know how I would do this. But I was very grateful because I met an amazing person called Shuna McCahon. And we kind of went into the dark together with maybe a tiny little candle.
So obviously you had your experience in law previously. Can I ask, how did you draw on your past experience as a lawyer as you started down this new path and as you started to work getting Beam going at the start?
Being a lawyer requires a great deal of tenacity and resilience. So I'm really grateful for the fact that I had years of learning patience as well, sitting outside of court, waiting for my case to come on. The real skill as a lawyer is being able to deal with the unexpected, being able to think quickly on your feet, but also resilience, tenacity. All of those qualities certainly set me in good stead when I left the bar. But for the first time in my life, I understood in a very small way what it would feel like to be unemployed. I mean, I had the opportunity to go back, the next week if I chose to. But I remember, because I left, I didn't know how to set this up. I didn't know what I was doing. And after like the first week, oh, not going to work. But try it 4 weeks later. And this sense of work is structure. It's a gift. It provides you with, like I say, structure of your life. So that was hard.
Can I just ask one more question around the start of Beam as a charity? What was the first step that you took? How did you get going, as it were?
Well, coming back to this point about not having work and it being structure and giving you kind of a way in which what you do, I had, like I said, 4 weeks where I wasn't working, maybe even longer than that. And my son came around the house and, he saw me. I was normally quite well turned out. And I think I had a tracksuit on and I was looking pretty rough. He said to me, "Mom, what are you doing?" I was like, he's like, you need a job. I was like, I have a job. He was like, well, why aren't you setting up this group? And I said, because I don't know I don't know how. And the first step, he said, what was the first step? He said to me, well, what is the first step? What would you do if you were setting up a group? And I was like, make a poster. And he was like, then make a poster. I tried to argue with him and he was like, no, get on and do it. And it was through then meeting this woman who came to another kind of support group that I had been volunteering at. She then 2 days later offered us a room, and then I contacted Shuna. I was like, hey, let's go. So it was actually kind of this step by step. There wasn't this great plan. In fact, I think we went forward with a lot of hope and a desire to do good. But if you said, did you make your year plan or anything, like, we didn't. We just knew what we wanted to do, and I prayed a lot.
So Shuna, would you be able to tell us a bit about your own background and how your career path led you towards working with Cherie and Beam?
Yes. So very different path for me. I went to St Andrews University and studied psychology there. Loved psychology, but at that point, it became very clear to me that counselling was what I wanted to pursue in my life. And I think one of the main reasons for that was because things that happened while I was at university that I would really have benefited from counselling for. And at that point, it just really wasn't a recognised thing. So I kind of struggled on my own. But I think from there was this desire I want to offer to other people what I knew that I needed and wasn't accessible for me at that point. So I went on, had children, and then when the time was right, started studying to become a counsellor. And from the very beginning, it was like this coat just feels like it fits me perfectly. It's what I'm meant to be doing. So started off working with adults, broadened my practice to work with children and young people. But it's my clients that teach me everything, really. And it was one particular client that I worked with for 2 years who really broke my heart for the mothers, for Beam and the mothers, because for this particular client, she had battled with mental health issues and had 3 young children who were removed from her care and put into the care of her ex-partner who was abusive, and she was denied any access to these children. And she lived for her children. She absolutely lived for her children. And without access to the children, not even being able to see the children, it was like she just lost her purpose, her hope. There was nothing for her to live for. And very sadly, she took her life. And it was heartbreaking to walk through that with her. And it was while I was working with her that I met Cherie. We were involved in another project together, supporting young people in a hostel, and it so happened that one day we were in Chelmsford taking a boy to the passport office to get his passport, and we had half an hour to kill, and we went for a coffee, and we started talking, and Cherie started to share what was on her heart, setting up Beam, and as soon as she started talking, it was like, there was no question. I just knew this was what I needed to be involved in. This is what I needed to be doing. So that's where it started.
Would you be able to tell us a bit about the work that Beam now does within the community?
Do you want to start, Cherie, or
Go ahead, you start. Go ahead and start.
So I think as Cherie said, when we started, we did not really have a plan beyond somebody offered us their coffee shop for a couple of hours one morning a week, and so we set up, and it's like that first session, we didn't know if anybody was going to come, and actually 3 people did come, and we just went on from there, week by week, step by step. And so it started off very much as a meeting, a face-to-face meeting once a week. The women knew that they could come and that they would be offered a place of acceptance and love where there was no judgment. And the no judgment bit was so important, because these women, all of their lives, they've been judged. And so they are on such high alert for any sense of being judged. So yeah, it was very, very important that it was a place of just acceptance, no judgment.
And that was actually a struggle for me, I think, at the beginning, because my mind, sorry to interrupt there, Shuna. I have being a lawyer, being trained to think very analytically, when women would begin to tell about experiences they had with social workers or with professionals, and my mind would begin to sort of think, well, that didn't, certain things they'd say, I think, well, I don't think that happened, or she definitely didn't spit in your face, and but I realized, and as Shuna said, that they're very sensitive, highly attuned to anybody. You can also tell if someone's judging you. And I needed really to set aside that kind of analytical judgment of what they were saying and just listen and just be with them, the being with them and hearing them out. And what we found is, in that safe space, that women began to actually be able to feel safe and then begin to accept and receive from each other and from the group a way forward, because they're very, very much stuck in often lives that are either highly chaotic or else they are completely cut off from society.